Now, I don't know who picked these topics or how they advertised them, but I am detecting something from a simple survey of the crowd in front of me, with a few exceptions, that you understood it to be a class 4 rather than about elderly.
Not entirely true.
I'm teasing.
I felt like I was all those coming those stairs.
Well, you know, I had that written at the top here. It said, when working with the elderly, avoid locations that start with up or down stairs.
The thing that drew my interest was, I'm obviously not a kid anymore. On top of that, I have had a desire for some time to see what I can do with the elderly. And the pastor has said, maybe you can go to the Merriman House, which is up at the hospital, or down to the facility down the other end of town, and maybe put in an afternoon down there, an hour or so each week. And so I have been praying about that. And so I am looking for what are the kinds of things that I'm there myself, and yet I feel that's a good thing because you can equate people.
Yep.
At the same time, I really need enough insight that I probably don't have because I don't feel like I'm that old.
Well, that's an excellent goal or desire. Yes, sir.
So, my wife and I have been working with elderly for the past 10 years, and we work for ourselves in a lot of ways. So we have opportunities to invite them to church or talk about God. And we have family that's elderly that want to influence them with them as far as how we live our life, what we say, and we go to church weekly. And in those 3 cases, we're around people that are elderly, and we know a lot about it. We can always learn more. Is what the thing is.
Oh yeah. And we're going to talk about this because I had no idea how to prepare for this, because I didn't understand which way it went either. So we're going to go from both directions.
You should have talked to me. I'd have told you which way to go.
I know. Where was my head? See, I'm young and I lack wisdom. There we go.
Well, I think there's only...
God will give us what we need through you.
There's only one individual in the room here that might have a little bit more age on it than me.
Well, we're gonna address that subject too. And before we do, brother, would you take us to the Lord?
Yes. You go ahead, sir. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for the opportunity to come to this conference where we can sit down, open your word, and have plenty of time to discuss, to hear what your word has to say about unique topics. Lord, we pray that as we open our minds and our hearts, let us make sure that our ears are attuned to the topic that we will hear this afternoon. For the elderly, by their mere position on this earth right now, if they are not saved, they do not have much time to get to that point, Lord. So, Lord, give us the wisdom of yours, not our own, but give us the wisdom that we can utilize in every bit of the ministry that we come up with, whether that's a one-on-one ministry or a group ministry. But we pray, Lord, that you would be with each and every one of us, and that uppermost in our minds would be the promotion of your word to those who need it most and have the least amount of time to accomplish that. Thank you, Lord, for all you do for us. And it is in your Son's name I pray. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Now this is done at 4:50. Let me put my number back up here. Okay, so we got all the time in the world. That's great. Because actually, well, it's only supper after this. You can eat supper anytime. So, all right. working with the elderly. Now, I think I know why I was asked to do this session, and I don't think it's because the Browns found out how old I am. I think it's because they know I have a rather extensive nursing home ministry, and it keeps getting bigger, which is exciting because when a nursing home calls you and asks you to come and do a service with no holds barred, no strings attached, and they're going to bring people to you and sometimes provide refreshments so that you can share the gospel with. Ain't America great?
Yeah.
And how many people respond? That isn't the point. Is how many of us are underusing the go and make a disciple mandate? Well, if somebody's going to make it easy for me to do that, then I'll take credit for having done my turn and feel guilty then because I'm limiting it to that. I might be doing it way more than somebody else, but I still know where my lack is. That's the two-sided part of this that I want to address. I want to talk about working with elderly, whether you're going to a nursing home to deal with older people, but the nursing home that I work at, all three of them, there are a number of residents that are younger than I am. Because nursing homes aren't just for old folks. They're rehab centers, they call them. And if you've had a stroke or a serious accident and you're significantly disabled and you can't live in your house anymore and you don't have a spouse or a family member or the money to have private care, you're going to end up in a nursing home. Number one reason for people in a nursing home, in my experience, is lack of leg strength. The inability to go up and down stairs or to get into the toilet or bathe yourself or feed yourself. Lack of leg strength. And that's the number one reason people end up in a nursing home. Exercise. Keep that up. But what do you do with those people? How do you reach them for Christ? How do you engage them? There's all kinds of ways. We're going to talk about that. But what about older people? Let's not call them old. Let's just say older people. Okay, well, how old is old?
You're only as old as you feel.
Well, I hope I'm not that old. My neck was killing me all the way up here, and my knee on the ride. My knee doesn't bother me at all until I'm sitting down, and I live 6 hours away from here. That's a long sit.
Oh, I went to a funeral, and there was a 95-year-old guy, and he was talking to the minister, and he said, boy, he died so young, and the guy that died was 75.
Yeah.
And then the minister was like 42.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a relative.
It is. The people in my nursing home, they're constantly complimenting me on my youthful appearance, and they call me a young man, and some of them are in their 90s, and relative to them, I am. But then there's my son, who's 16, who is, well, let me reverse that. I am old enough to be his grandfather. And he has been mistaken for my grandson from more astute people than the ones at the nursing home who can't see. So, but my birthday was last month, and I was 62. And I do, for most people's perception, I'm younger than or look younger than I am. And I don't mind that. Just don't watch me trying to get out of the car. So, but how old is old? Am I an old man? My 16-year-old thinks I am, but he says it from a safe enough distance. He knows about the knee, so he knows I can't catch him, but he also knows he can't get away if I do. So how old is old? And what are we talking about? What about the people in my church that come, that are able to come? They can drive into church, but they may be over 50. Okay, that's generally where we start counting people as older, over 50. And what about them? What about when they don't do anything? How many of you ever played volleyball? I hope some of you did. Now, did you ever play, were you any good at it?
No.
Okay, one of you, all right? And what do you hate? Those of you who are no good at it, you were probably the ones that the other team players hated to have on their team. Because what happens? Where do you put it?
You can't serve it.
No, it just happened to be a ball.
I just happened to have a volleyball. Now, I was really good at serving. I was pretty good, too. Once upon a time, I could jump, and I was good on that front line, and I knew what to do when it came towards me. But if it didn't come towards me, it would go towards somebody else, and they would either do that, which is not what you're supposed to do with a volleyball, or they would do this. Here, toss it back to a little bit of an arc. They'd get out of the way, or flinch, or now do the same thing, but just a little bit to the side. And they just stand there. Right? But no. They do that. And you hate that. Well, at least try, you know. In a team effort, somebody who doesn't try is infuriating to those who are trying. Well, what about those older people who have reached or are approaching retirement? Okay, I'm 62. Social Security says I got 4.5 more years to go. My wife and I talk about that. What does retirement mean for us? Well, it means you quit working. You need income to do that. I still have, well, my 16-year-old, 4.5 years from now, should be just about done with college or close to. The others are all grown up and gone. But are still going to need income, and probably Social Security alone isn't going to be sufficient. We have enough money to move away from Dutchess County, New York, where I live, where I could not afford to live without income. And I have to go somewhere where I don't have to pay as much. But I'd still have to work. And how could I've been called to the ministry. That doesn't come with a time stop. And if I leave Bethel Baptist Church, hand that over to somebody else, which is what I'm beginning to think about doing, while it's doing well, hand it over to somebody else, but I'm still called to the ministry, I'm going to have to do something for the Lord. I cannot not do something. But I have plenty of people in my life who find no problem at all with not doing something. They stand there and watch the ball go by. It's infuriating. There's so much to do. So to work with the elderly is a two-sided coin. Getting mature people to re-engage in the work, or dealing with people who are at death's door, so to speak. So let's start. The first thing you need to do in any kind of Christian work or any kind of work is exhibit Christ-likeness. If you're going to work with elderly people, you need to have integrity. You need to show devotion, respect, selflessness, honesty, love. Don't think that, you know that. You can tell when somebody's being phony to you. Kids can tell. Old people can tell too. And they have their favorites. Just go to a nursing home someday and ask them who their favorite staff member is. And if they're reluctant to say, well, are there some that aren't as favorite? Oh, yeah. I used to work with one fellow. I visited him every week. He died just shortly after his 100th birthday. World War II veteran, combat veteran, sharp as a tack, great fellow to talk to. His description of the nursing home was it's heaven's waiting room. But he wasn't a believer, and so I'm pretty sure he got that wrong. And he would always change the subject when I would try to explain how to turn it into heaven's waiting room. But he had this comment about certain aides that would come in. Some of them he really liked. And this guy was incredible because he loved the food at the nursing home. He thought it was great, and he thought it was worth every penny he was spending there because he understood what it meant, that they were taking care of him, giving him a place. But he said some of these people are working under false pretenses. He would ask them, are you getting paid for this? Well, you're working under false pretenses then, because they weren't doing their job. He could tell. He was no dummy. But people who showed any kind of selflessness or integrity in their work received his admiration. That's what you need to do. You have to win an audience. And then you need to know your audience. Years ago, I had an opportunity to work in a church, and I was given I forget what they called it, but it was it was a big church, and they had several adult groups, different ages. They had them age categorized just like the kids groups, and I had the really old folks. And I had a real struggle with that until one day I was sitting at home with my wife, and we were talking about why I was having trouble with it, why I just didn't seem to be communicating, and it was because I wasn't focusing or picturing or understanding my audience, the specific audience. I was just preparing a lesson without regard to who was hearing it. And it doesn't work. You need to know the people you're working with, whether it's the people in your church or the people in the nursing home. Learn their names. You know, it is hard to remember names, but the number one reason it's hard to remember names is that you didn't pay attention in the first place when you were told the name. People know that when you're not paying attention. I have a fellow that calls me at least every day, several times a day sometimes. His name is Jeff. He's got some special needs. He lives at home with his brother, but he lives like a homeless person. He sleeps in his clothes. He doesn't bathe. He'll, keep odd hours, but I'm his friend and he knows the church phone number. I won't give him my private number because he calls me every day. And when he calls me, he doesn't talk in complete sentences and he rambles and, I have the phone there, but I'm reading a book or something, and every now and then, are you there? He knows when I'm not listening. He can tell over the phone that I'm not listening. I don't know how he can tell, but he can. People can tell that. So pay attention. Speak up. I have a nursing home voice. Do you know that's the most wonderful thing in the whole idea of nursing home ministry? I'm sitting next to somebody telling them the gospel, and everybody up and down the hallway is hearing it.
Yeah.
Including the staff. It's tremendous, and nobody comes up and shushes me. The same residents love when I come by. Not because they like to hear the gospel, but because they can hear me. Other people just go up and talk to them in their normal voice, and I'm already having trouble with the low tones of a human voice. I've always been very careful of my hearing, always wore protective hearing, and now all of a sudden everybody in my family mumbles. And I'm threatening to go get my hearing tested to prove that they all mumble. But the people in the nursing home can hear me. And they're engaged. We have a Bible study. And I teach them my Sunday school class. I take it from my church and I go in. They're Catholics, they're this, they're that, the other thing. This is an activity for them, but we call it a Bible study. The administration required that I start it. Now get that. So I did. And I can pull them from other activities. And I sit there in my nursing home voice and we do that. And there's all kinds of things that you can use and do. And now the challenge is to switch this idea from ministering at a nursing home and engaging the older people in your church. Well, why can't they do that? If they are, in fact, retired, then they've got more time to go to the nursing home than I do. If I go to the nursing home for a service, it's on a Sunday. That makes a long day because the nursing home isn't next door. And for me, it's a 23-mile round trip to the nursing home. I don't care. I'll do it. But somebody else could do it too. And that would really be better from the perspective of my mandate as a pastor, which is to train workers to do the work of the ministry, right? But if they're standing there watching the ball go by, now what do? I'm not authorized to kick them off the team, though I might want to. Where do you stand in the rotation? Do you ever, now think back to those volleyball days. If you use a standard 3-3 and a server, or however you set it up, the 3 up on the net generally are more engaged in the game than the 3 on the backcourt. That's the ones in the backcourt that watch the ball go by. Well, I thought it was out. The farther away, and that's a rule in all of life. Think about when Israel was organized around the tabernacle out in the wilderness. The outskirts of the camp was where all the trouble was. In your classrooms, the kids that sit in the back row, you know, the old back of the bus gang, the whole thing. Out of sight, out of mind. Kids understand that. Older people understand that. And they're going to look for a way. We're all lazy. We're all selfish. We all want to shovel off the dirty job to somebody else. We think we've done our work and it's time to retire. But God has a different viewpoint. Where do you stand in your churches? And how do you encourage other adults in your congregation to re-engage in the work? Care about the job. Care about the job, whether it's children, teaching adults, teaching older people, learning for yourself, parenting, grandparenting. Care about the job. Every one of those is a gift from God for you to do what He's commanded you to do, that we've learned requires getting dressed up and going out and knocking on doors and being scared to knock on those doors, and people don't want to talk to us, and we think that's the way to do the great event, the Great Commission, and that is not the way at all. The way has been given to us over and over and over in these relational ways, and we sit and watch the ball go by. Here's another aspect to that. It has to do with care. It's an extension of that or an enhancement of it. Have a purpose. What's your purpose? With any kind of teaching, have a purpose. In the class downstairs, creative Bible teaching, I recounted, did you ever study higher math in high school? Some of you? I mean, like Algebra 2 or trigonometry. I asked my trigonometry teacher. I had both in the same year. And that was a bit of a challenge. But trigonometry, I didn't understand. I didn't understand what it was for. I knew how to do it, but I didn't understand it. And I asked one time, what is this for? And the teacher was tired of me because I was cut up in class and other kinds of things. And so his answer was, well, it's just so you can teach other high school kids. And I just turned my brain off after that and found out later in a Navy electronics class what trigonometry was for and wished I had learned it. But I had no purpose. He didn't have a purpose in teaching me. And so we disconnected. And that's what will happen every time. What is your purpose? Is your purpose to make a disciple? Well, how are you going to do that? You've got to be a disciple. What's a disciple? A follower of Jesus. You can't point at Jesus and say, go follow him. The scriptures give us an example. Come and see, the one brother said to his brother. Come and see. The woman of Samaria. Come and see. That's making disciples. You've got to be drawing closer to Christ in order to draw people to Christ. So what's your purpose? Are you working with or are you working on the elderly? If you're working with, and if you're getting paid to do it, if they're going to give you a stipend, well, one day a week, I work at the nursing home. After I'd been volunteering there with my monthly service, they wanted to add a chaplain to the activities department. Well, I was the minister they knew. So they asked me. I didn't really need another job. At that time, our Christian school was pretty active. I'm the principal of the school, and pastor of the church, and father of 5 young children. I did not need another job. But I talked to my deacons about it, and they said, well, you're down there at the nursing home enough already. You may as well get paid for it. So I started, and I got 1 day a week, 4 hours in this one, 4 hours in that one. And they're owned by the same company. Well, if you're getting paid, earn your pay. Now, they pay me pretty generously. I'm listed as a consultant. I don't understand it. And it's changed owners a couple times, and I keep thinking, well, that's the end of my job. But they've kept me on. And I'm pretty sure it's because the residents like it. And they would kick up a really big fuss because I'm different. I sit with them, and I visit with them, and I tell them stories about my kids. And they all know I'm here doing this, and they're waiting for a report about it when I get home. And they're really interested about this class, which they know because I told them what I'm going to be doing and that they're my guinea pigs. And they understand that and they don't care, or at least they don't express that they care. So if you're getting paid, earn your pay. If you're ministering, what's that word mean? Serve. Then be a servant. Do servants have demands? Expectations? Requirements? No. Servants stand and serve. Give. My session on the fatherhood of God earlier. What does the Father do? He gives his Son. He gives all to his Son. Why does he do that? Because he loves his Son. That's the stated purpose. Well, that should change how we think of the word love. So if you're going to give, think about how God gave and apply that to your service to others. Give. Sacrifice yourself. The old joke in softball. Sacrifice your body. Dive for the ball. Well, sacrifice your body. Dive for the ball. Be engaged in the game. You notice how I can't separate working with older people and using older people to do work. Because my goal, part of my goal at the nursing home is to see these people saved And do what? They can't go home. They can't go back to their churches. But you know what? They got a captive audience. Some of them have a roommate. Minister to that person. Be a friend. Don't grumble at the staff. Yeah, some of them are incompetent. Some of them are selfish. Some of them don't care. Some of them may be abusive. Hey, you know what? That's the world we live in. We still have to live righteously. Biblical counseling tells you that. If you ever go to marriage counseling, and you should, whether you need it or not, so-called. When I get a couple that comes in, the first thing I do after we introduce ourselves, I look at I'm going to pretend right here, okay? I look at the man and I say, you know what? I can't do a thing about her. All I can do is help you to live righteously with her. You know what? I can't do a thing about him. All I can do is help you to live righteously with him. I can't do a thing about your roommate or your staff member or the doctor or the nurse or whoever it is, or your family member that comes in and complains at you for being in a nursing home, like you're some kind of burden in their life, that they forced you to do, that you forced them to put you there. That kind of nonsense does go on. It's heartbreaking. But they can live for Christ. They have to live for Christ. The people in Syria have to live for Christ. The people in Ethiopia or in Central African Republic or in North Korea have to live for Christ. Everybody does. You can encourage that. Is the person that you're working with a client? You know that word. Or are you their caregiver? Big difference. Caregivers can have clients, but then they're not really giving care. They're doing a job. And they'll come in, they'll wash you, roll you over, feed you, and powder you down, and they've done their job. And it's physical care, but they can do that without caring at all. And they can do it gently and thoroughly and professionally without an ounce of care. Or you can sit there with somebody in hospice care who is beyond any kind of physical care, and you can sit there and do nothing and care so thoroughly that it works. What do you think when you do that? So, whether it's being a functioning part of the body of Christ in your church, or reaching out to older people, where God opens the door and somebody said, please come in and minister to these people. It's very different than some professional chaplaincy positions. I am a chaplain in the Civil Air Patrol. And the Civil Air Patrol is an auxiliary of the United States Air Force. And so I had to qualify as an Air Force chaplain in everything except age. And the requirements there are very different than the regular Baptist chaplaincy, which is my endorsing agency. The Air Force cared about my education and my transcripts. The GARBC cared about my beliefs. The Air Force doesn't care about my beliefs. In fact, they don't want me expressing my beliefs. They're like my local fire company, which I'm the chaplain for, and they didn't care about any kind of endorsing agency. They just want me to bless the fire trucks when they get them new and give a speech every Memorial Day. They used to do it on 9/11. We used to have those periodically, and they would ask me to come and do that. And then that kind of got old after a while. They still remember it, but they don't have a big ceremony anymore. But the chaplaincy is, don't do this, don't do that, don't pray in Jesus' name, don't be sectarian in any way, don't speak against this, that, and the other thing. And, well, then what am I doing? What kind of service can you do? What kind of prayer can you do to nobody? And I've asked that question, and because I refuse to do that. I pray in Jesus' name, and I tell people what I am and what I believe, and I'm just, Civil Air Patrol has 4 core values: integrity, respect, excellence, and the number 1, volunteer service. So you can't get fired. The worst they can do is tell me I can't be a chaplain anymore. But they're not going to kick me out because they need an extra adult or they can't run their meetings. So, but this is what the world does. But when they invite you to come in as a minister of the gospel, to open the word of God to people, go for it. I would pay for the privilege. But I'm being asked to come in, and I'm being given the opportunity. It's an incredible thing. My children have all grown up in the nursing home. My youngest boy, you see him around here, is the tall redhead. When he was born, on the way home from the hospital, we stopped at the nursing home because they all knew we were having a baby. And I took him into the dementia ward and handed him around. They didn't even wash their hands. Yeah, well, he's kind of dirty himself. He's 16 years old now, and he's pretty healthy. He survived. Be careful with children, of course. But still, my kids grew up. They aren't afraid of wheelchairs. They aren't afraid of hardware. They aren't afraid of those old ladies reaching out and wanting to hold them and hug them and kiss them. And when they're little, they'll get up in their laps. And you know what? I've seen residents whose grandchildren come to visit, and they're scared of grandma. And the look on grandma's face is heartbreaking. Now, I get a big audience, and I understand a large part of it isn't anything to do with me. It's because I bring my kids, and they want to look at the kids. That's okay. If that's what it takes, I'll have more kids. And so do what you can. When you make disciples, though, what's required? You have to introduce Jesus Christ. How do you do that? He's not a phantom. He's not an imaginary person. He's a real historical figure, and the record of that is in here. So, teach the Bible. Don't be afraid of that. Don't think you have to water it down or soften it for anybody. Just go ahead and imagine that they're in your Sunday school class, they've come to your church, and they just are passing through the town like tourists do here. They walk in on a Sunday morning, and they're going to get what they get, right? Well, do a little more preparation for that. You understand coming in what these people are. You can tailor your message accordingly, or your lesson, but do it anyway. Give them a Bible. Take the stuff that you do in Sunday school. You know what's the difference between an old person and a child? You don't know. You know why? You know why you don't know? Because there is no difference. So do the same things. Guess what? They like it. You know what this is, right? It's an Evangel cube. You know what? They come in all sizes. Guess what? This one works better in the nursing home than this one does.
Yeah.
This one works great at camp. I can keep it in my pocket, and I can get one kid right up front, and I can play this little thing with him. And he can see it. But the nursing home, find the front. You know, man is separated from God by his sin. And it takes the death of Jesus Christ to remedy that. Christ was buried because he was dead. And they thought that was the end of their problem. But he rose from the dead for our justification. And when he did that, he bridged that gap between us and God and gave us the way to heaven. So we can have fellowship with God. We are cut off from hell rather than cut off from heaven. That's an evangelium. I did it in the short version. But you could do a lesson per side. That's a lot of fun. And all kinds of things. Take all the stuff you do in Sunday school to the nursing home. The more the better. I take those big teaching pictures. We got a whole big stack of them. I think ABWE published them. I think. My wife bought them and I used them. And they're great. They're giant pictures, like this big. And it's from Genesis to Revelation. It's a stack like this. And you pick out the ones you want for whatever lesson you wish, and you can hold them up, and everybody in the room can see them, and they are looking at them. And they're listening then instead of sleeping. Some of them will sleep anyway. Doesn't matter. That's not your responsibility. People can hear when they're sleeping. Just do it anyway. Everybody sleep. Doesn't matter. Then you can say whatever you like. Teach the Bible. Expect growth and fruit. See, that's the problem with the ones in our churches who are not engaged. They've stopped bearing fruit. You know what the scripture says when it uses an illustration like that about a tree that's no longer fruit bearing. That's a dangerous place to be. We use, as the Bible does, the analogy of a body. Well, when part of your body isn't working, that's when the doctor gets out the scissors. That's part of our explanation for church discipline. We have to cut out the diseased part. That's harsh. That's unkind, seemingly. That's certainly uncomfortable and unpleasant. But it's necessary. If you've ever had a part of your body that was diseased and threatening the rest of the body, you want it gone. Have fellowship. You know what? You minister properly or effectively, or however you wish to say that, because obviously you have no control over the outcome. But let's suppose the Lord blesses your ministry and somebody comes to know Christ. Well, you've got a new brother in Christ. And now you have fellowship. The nursing homes that I work at over the years, and it's been 28 years, there have been a few believers, and they're pretty evident. They look for me. There's one fellow there right now. He's younger than I. No, he's not either. He's about my age. But he's got a lot of serious physical problems. He's grossly overweight. He can't care for himself. He's deaf as a post, wears hearing aids. And if I really talk loudly and if he watches my face, he can hear what I'm saying and track. And he engages. He understands all this. He is a believer. Pentecostal, but he's a believer. And he's been part of my Bible study. And his interaction stimulates the other people the way I can't do it. And of course, then they learn. And what are they going to learn to do? They're going to learn to serve. That's what we learn to do. That's what we learn to do. So don't try to get or try to do things that younger people do. You're not going to do it. We're not going to play volleyball. Okay? Can use it as an illustration, but you don't have to. I can't play volleyball anymore either. My wife would shoot me if she thought I was going to go out and play volleyball. If I keep whining about my knees. And there's nothing wrong with my knees. I went to the doctor. I thought I had arthritis really bad, because I do have arthritis. And my knees were killing me. I mean, really bad. So I went to an orthopedic surgeon. He took x-rays. He says, your knees are fine. So I'm sitting on the edge of his exam bench, And he grabs my leg and he twists it this way. Does that hurt? No. Does that hurt? No. Does that hurt? I have bone spurs on the top of my kneecaps. They're irritating the tendons. That's where the pain's coming from. He says, just quit running and the pain will go away. Well, it took a year, but it did go away. He says, we could get rid of those bone spurs, but if you think those tendons are irritated now, so we left them there. But long time sitting, and my knees hurt. So I don't play volleyball because that would irritate those tendons and make me whine some more. And then my wife would get tired of it. So don't try to do what younger people do. You're not a younger person anymore. And the people you're going to be working with aren't young people anymore. Don't have them get up and march around the room to Onward Christian Soldiers or anything like that you do with little kids. Don't necessarily give them manipulatives if they're going to put them in their mouth. Be wise, be careful, consult with the nursing home staff before you give food or try other things. But generally speaking, find age-appropriate or ability-appropriate things to do. Disability is a bad word. It's a misnomer. There really is no such thing as disability. Think about it. If all you had... That's not a screen. I don't want to write on that.
No.
That would be...
There's one behind it.
Okay, well, we'll let it go. It just matters. If I write the word disability up here, and you were to define that, just as it stands, not in a sentence, just the word disability, it becomes an exceedingly comprehensive word, right? It means unable. Now, everybody here knows somebody who is disabled, or maybe you are disabled in some way, but do you have no ability? Absolutely not. There's nobody. My sister, years ago, worked for the city of Pittsburgh with an organization called Sports by Ability. It took teens and young adults who had some physical disability and had them compete in sports, whatever they were able to do. So this was back before the insurance company got angry with crutches, and they would have crutch races down the hallway. Dangerous for bystanders as well as for the participants. But some of those people, they plant that crutch and pivot on that thing. It was incredible what they were able to do. Others were doing wheelchair soccer, or they had some people, you've seen them in the jerry chairs, the severely retarded people with the severe disfigurement, the mouth all twisted up, you know what I mean? And they would put a life jacket on them with two people on either side, put them in a pool. And they would swim. It took an hour. They would swim. It's what they were able to do. Sports by ability. Well, what are you able to do? What are the people in your church able to do? You can't walk. You can't hear anymore. Your vision is failing. Can't remember where you left your keys. That's okay. Can you pray for somebody? Maybe you can correspond. Maybe you can encourage. There's an older lady in our church. She's relatively new to our congregation. She was saved as a child, never grew. So now she's got all kinds of questions. Very intelligent woman in her mid-70s. Incredibly intelligent and just chock full of questions. She's never heard this kind of teaching, and she's just hungry for it. Well, we had a young girl, neighbor girl, 15 years old, who also had not ever been taught. So I gave a discipleship booklet to the older lady and said, I want you to go through this with the younger girl. Oh, I don't know anything in here. That's why I want you to go through it with Then I don't have to teach you, and then let's just cut to the chase, and you both learn it together. Well, that's a way to do it. It works at the nursing home, too. Spend a little bit of money. Talk to your pastors. They'll probably come up with it. The church will pay for it. Take it to the nursing home. take it to the next door neighbor, go visit somebody, engage. Did I answer your question?
I think a lot of it makes a lot of sense.
So,
Absolutely.
yes.
If any one of us were to get to the point of having to be in the person that is being visited in a nursing home, I mean, I can't imagine what it is that the resident wants out of somebody who comes in to minister. What do you think it is that they want after 28 years of being in there? Do you find a common thread, or do you think you know?
Absolutely. And this was a universal thing, whether the person's a believer or not, but it certainly is the case for a believer. I carry a little folding stool, smaller than this, and I carry my tote bag. I have my hymn book, my Bible, my harmonica, and then whatever I can fit in it that I take along with me for show and tell. And I sit and I spend time. Time is what they want.
And do you think that's indicative of caring?
That is the definition of care. When our modern age, when parents buy a fancy house that costs $500,000 and they both have to work to pay for the house and the taxes, kids are in the way. They're looking for after-school programs. When there's a snow day, they scream at the school for letting the kids go home. There's nobody home! You've got to watch my kids. Summer program. Every municipality in our county runs a summer camp now. Why? Because the parents are still at work and the kids are not in school. What are they going to do with those kids? They can't do anything with them, so they're off to day camp. And what happens to the kids? Sexually transmitted diseases, opioid drug abuse, addictions are rampant in my community. Used to be our big problem was Lyme's disease and West Nile virus. Those are still big problems. Not West Nile so much, but Lyme's disease. But now it's opioid. The kids have access to the cabinet. Mom's getting prescription drugs because she comes home from work and the kids are out of control because nobody's raising them. And she needs something to calm her down. Well, she leaves it in the medicine cabinet and the kids get it when she's gone. Or they go next door and get the neighbors. And spend a little time with. One time, some years ago, there was an effort in our county from organizations that work with youth. We all got invited up to Albany, to the Capitol, to talk with our legislator about what our program was and what we needed to do it more effectively. Big room like this, all of us sitting around a table. The legislator was here. I was next to him, and the clock went that way instead of this way. So I was the last one. Everybody told what their program was, and some of them were really nice programs and diligent people, honest, hardworking people, but every one of them, what they needed to make it more effective was more money. Until it got to me. I don't want any money. We've been just saying no for 2,000 years. We're going to continue to just say no. We have a very effective anti-drug program and all that other stuff. We don't need any money to do it. I just want access to the children. Well, every one of them got their money, but I didn't get access. That's the problem. And that's what people in a nursing home need. They are desperate for somebody to come. That's why that's the real reason the nursing home has kept me on when it's changed administrations, is because all the rest of the activities people have programs they've got to do. And they've got to prepare for them, they've got to set up and tear down after them, and they've got to fill out all the paperwork. I don't have to do any of that. I can pull up my chair and sit next to somebody and spend 25 minutes hearing about their grandchildren or talking about my children. And
doesn't others in that audience get restless when you're talking to just one person?
oh, well, that's a different thing. When I have the group, it's a group activity.
Okay.
But the individual thing is done individually. I go to their room or sit, and that's the folding chair thing is I'm tall, and looking down at a wheelchair bothers their neck and my back.
Yeah.
So I used to squat, but that knee, And so I have this little chair, and I can sit next to, I'm looking right in their eye, and the harmonica is nice. Well, I don't play the guitar, but I can put the harmonica right up against somebody's ear, and even if they can't hear it, they can feel it.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know how to play anything but hymns. So,
Specialist.
and because that's the only music I have, I carry a hymn book with me. I suppose if I had the music for other stuff, I could play it, but I don't have that. And the bag gets pretty heavy with a hymn book in it, so.
So it's like a personal conversation.
Exactly. It's me visiting you because I know you and I care. And when I go in and meet a new person, I knock on the door because it's their room. And they look up and, who are you? Well, I'm the chaplain. Well, that gets all kinds of responses. And most of them are negative because most of them are Catholic. And they don't know what a chaplain is, except they know it's not a priest. And especially if they find out I used to be Catholic, well, man, it's terrible. You're no longer. Although some, well, once a Catholic, always a Catholic, and then they'll let me talk to them. But usually I just ignore the reaction and just start talking to them. And then they forget the reaction, and they start talking back to me. And then pretty soon I'm invited in, I put my chair out, and we're having a conversation. And they said, when are you coming back? And then the questions start. Well, what do you mean you're a chaplain? What do you do? Or, you're a minister? I've never met a minister before. What's that like? Or they've had problems.
Do you get to any sort of Christian message with these people on first visit, or it take you 4 or 5 visits to reach that point?
It depends. And the thing it depends most on is my obedience to the word. How quickly am I willing to get to the Christian message? That's because rarely is it that I'm having opposition to it. It's usually just because I'm scared and unwilling to do it until I feel comfortable. And meanwhile, they could be gone the next week by the time I get back. And when I used to do it on Fridays, but I was finding that my ministry has changed and I'm away a lot on Fridays. I miss a Friday, that's 2 weeks I'm gone. A second Friday that's a lifetime. I come back and there's a list of people who have died and they're out of my life now. I don't have any more opportunity with them. Some of these people, their hold on life is very fragile. Why am I hesitating? It's only sin.
Well, because you have a lot of senior citizens where if I went to 50 doors and I knocked on it, and I gave them a card just like my name and phone number and gave them a couple cookies, and then I go see them again, and then that opens up opportunities to invite them to church. But if I just go there and knock on the door and say I'm from such and such a church, then those same people will cut you off right away most of the time.
And that's likely.
But you seem to have more results if you put a little bit extra effort into it.
Well, again, it's a relationship. You're not a salesman.
There's also an expectation that they have already of you, because they're in one place. They're all there because they're not in their own homes, and you've come in saying, "This is my badge. I'm so and so. This is my job. I get to tell you these things, and can you just listen to me for 5 minutes while I tell you, and then we can chat about some other stuff. I mean, you can do that much more easily than somebody that we can cold knock on
Oh
doors.
yeah. Well, the nurse in the same facility can't do that. I could make up a survey. In fact, I should do this. Then that would answer your question. I'll make up a little survey. I'm not required to do one, but I could make one up. Hi, I'm the chaplain. I'd like to ask you a couple questions. What's your faith background? Have you ever gone to church? What do you believe about them? I could do that. And
Absolutely.
they would just think that's part of the
Being a
nursing
chaplain.
home. Yeah. And
That's cool.
you had a question.
Touching on what you just said previously about how do you overcome when you're times when you were afraid.
Well, I remember what I teach.
I'm in a situation where I'm one-on-one with this elderly lady, and she can't really do much at all, but she has a lot of knowledge in her mind, and her mind's all there and everything. But I get paid to help take care of her, so there's always another person there with me.
That's
So
it.
not that I'm afraid
It
to
should be
start sharing the gospel, but I can't.
What would make it appropriate?
Yeah. Well,
Excellent question, and that's actually an easier case. And this is where I can overcome it in many cases, is because, like I said, they all know I'm here, and they all know what I'm doing. So they're waiting for me to come back and tell them. Okay, well, that lady doesn't know you're here. She doesn't know what you're doing. But you go see her the next time, you say, oh, you know what I was doing? No, what? Well, she just asked you what you were doing.
so then I can tell her.
Then you can tell her.
Oh, there you go.
But the real thing is
Or ask her questions, like you
Sure.
just said.
Have you ever
a
been to
survey
something like
thing,
that?
maybe,
Yeah.
you would ask.
But when I said to you that disability is the wrong word, what disability is, the way we use it, is disobedience. That's what disability is. It's disobedience. And when I remember my own teaching, then I obey a little better. Sometimes.
The second Sunday of each month, we have a church service at the Oddfellows home, and one of the things I found during the hymn sings, if you're wondering if persons had any background, you'll see them mouthing the words.
Yes.
And they don't have the hymn books in it because they can't read anymore or something like that, but they're mouthing the words. And so what we do is to take the names down, and then we'll get together with those people later on and go through the gospel.
Amen. All kinds of ways. But you got to do it. And get those others involved. Get some buds on that dead wood.